Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you again today, talking about the idea of parenting being less about doing and more about being. And that is a very vague, esoteric thing to say. So hopefully, by the end of our episode, you will know a little bit more about what I'm talking about, because that just sounds like a bunch of psychobabbly mumbo jumbo, I would imagine, to most of you. So let's talk about what do I mean by that. And I am going to tell you a story like I often do. Actually two stories that sort of happened almost at the same time over the last couple of months. But I'm going to start with a confession, as I always do. And my confession for you this week is about the retreat, actually. So I am still riding the just afterglow wave that happens for me in the month or so after the retreat ends every year in October. It was an epic, just beautiful retreat season this year for me. So this year was the first year where I actually was able to run two retreats. So had a group of women come in for 5 days and then they left. And a couple days later, I got my second wave of guests, and it was just beautiful. I felt so grateful that I have managed to like cultivate enough interest and engagement to be able to run two instead of just one retreat. I got to experience that on so many levels. I mean, just selfishly, can I tell you that one of the things I loved about it is it made me, quote unquote, have to be up at the lake in Michigan for a longer amount of time. So when I first arrived, before the first group got there to get ready and set up the space, and you guys have no idea all the stuff that I do to get the retreat ready. And it's all just like a labor of love. I love all of it, like even the grocery shopping. So my chef sends me all of the grocery list for the retreat. I go out and get everything that's on the list, and half the time I don't even know what it's for. So, there's always some interesting little um some little interesting ingredient that I'm like, I've never even cooked with this before. This time, this isn't a good example of something I've never cooked with before, because I have. But for one of the retreats, I had to buy 12 lemongrass stalks. I'm like, I think this is the most lemongrass one person's ever bought. I had to get a jar of like vanilla paste, which I've never used before, but apparently makes everything 1,000,000% better. And I can attest to that. When I tasted our creme brulee, it was so good. And actually, the lemongrass was for that too. It was a really cool lemongrass creme brulee that was like the dessert after an Asian themed dinner. It was so delicious. So I do that. I set up all the furniture in the space. I put all together all the gift baskets. I clean the house from top to bottom. I set out all of the stuff outside, like the fire pit, and I make sure like our paddle boards are ready and there's lovely little seating areas and all the things that you would do to get ready. I get to make the table scape and the centerpiece, and then all of the beautiful little things that make the space lovely. So when I got out there a couple days before everybody to do all that stuff, the leaves had really just started changing. It was mostly green, and then there was just a few trees that were like sort of halfway changed, and you could tell they were going to become spectacular and everything. And by the time I left, like 2-ish weeks later, it had gone from mostly green to like the absolute pinnacle peak of colors. Like you could just start to tell that, like, oh yeah, in a couple of days it'll be kind of downhill from here. And it was just so cool. I just felt so gratified that I got to do that and everything. And already people have been signing up for next year. So I feel really gratified about that. Everything is beautiful. But in terms of a confession about all of that, there was one day during the retreat where our sort of programming was really about taking the beautiful esoteric topics that we had been discussing and exploring for that throughout the whole retreat and making them like tangible and applicable to life back home and particularly to parenting, because in this particular group that I'm thinking of, it was all moms. There were some in the first group that weren't parents, and that was great too. But in this group, the conversation centered around parenting. And my confession is that I don't think I did a very good job of helping translate, um, these more big picture and maybe like inner growth concepts to boots on the ground parenting. Like when the rubber meets the road, what does this mean for our parenting? And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I'm not done thinking about it. It's already flavored the little sort of proto itinerary that I'm already just formulating in my mind for next year's retreat. How to make that third day really tangible and powerful so that when people get home, they have more than just good vibes in their pockets. So that is my confession for this year, that or for this episode, is that, no matter how magical and beautiful the retreat is, there's always room to grow. And I don't nail every single thing. And yet, even so, the retreat for next year is already halfway booked. So I think those are both beautiful lessons, to know that I can always be better and I don't do everything perfectly. And also, perfection is not the necessary ingredient for the retreat to be so transformational and profound that people keep coming back every year. So this is the topic that I didn't do a great job of explaining or segueing at the retreat, that I'm making my second, maybe third or fourth attempt, actually. Usually by the time I'm talking about something on the podcast, I've already sussed it out a few times, even just in conversations with Mike or with clients or friends. So, but it still is something that's like really top of mind for me and seems really important to explore. And that's that. This topic is very much that, this kind of idea of being versus doing in parenting. And it all came to my mind. So, this is the first story. I told you I was going to tell you two stories. The first story is about one of my clients who's just getting started working with me. I met with her maybe like a month or so ago. And we had this sort of really great, like, introductory first session together where we kind of were just exploring and laying some foundational pieces and giving me a great like framework of what's going on internally for her and all that great stuff. And through the course of all of that, as we sort of segued into like, okay, takeaways and where are we going with all of this information, she told this great story about how she has a kiddo who was very unappreciative and rude when mom made her some banana bread. And her response is like, how did you manage to burn this banana bread? Why is this burnt? I don't want to eat it. Basically, not the response you'd hope to receive from your kiddo when you do something really nice for them. And all of the sort of things that went through this mom's mind when that happened. And it was a really great example that allowed us to kind of explore, what is the work that we're doing here and how does that apply to this situation. So having a great concrete example is really, really helpful when we're trying to make these esoteric concepts tangible, right? So her little 11-year-old had been quite rude or whatever. And so we sort of talked about how it's so common, so many parents do this, where we sort of take this moment in time where our kids, aren't making a great choice about their behavior. And we know we need to do something about it. But there's also a part of us that takes that moment in time and makes it mean something really big and global. It sort of like triggers this part of us that has this idea about like a bigger mission or our bigger job as parents. And that's exactly what was happening for this mom, among other things. She said, I'm all I can think of is that I'm just going to be sending this 18 or 19-year-old kid out into the world who is inconsiderate and doesn't have any humanity. And, that is terrible. And I asked her a question that, might be sound like a weird question to ask somebody. I said, well, I get that it would be really a bummer for her if she were the kind of person who is inconsiderate and doesn't have any humanity. That would be a really hard thing for her to be in this world, right? Because she would be toxifying her relationships. People wouldn't really enjoy her company, all of those things. So that would stink for her. I get that. But why do you need her to be that person? Like, why would it suck for you that she, might be this person when she's 18 or whatever? And she was super open and honest. And I think she said something that we probably all think a little bit about our parenting, which is because that would mean that I've spent 18 years working at this and have just put out into the world this, inconsiderate person. It would mean that I failed. It would mean that I wasted those 18 years. That if I can even in 18 years create somebody who has a little bit of gratitude and manners, what even is what am I even doing? Like what is my value basically? And I was, first of all, very impressed with her honesty because I mean, who among us hasn't thought these thoughts? When we see our kids misbehaving, it's not just, oh, this kid misbehaved. It's, this kid is going to never learn this skill. I'm, creating a monster here, basically. I'm working my butt off, and all I'm doing is creating a monster. And what does that mean about me? It means that I've wasted my life working my ass off at something that is terrible. And I think we've all felt that way before. So, I we had this kind of conversation where she was kind of acknowledging, like, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of making my kid's behavior mean something about me. I'm making it about me. The fact that my kid wasn't grateful for this banana bread means that I'm a failure. And and we even kind of talked about like how in a really weird accidental way, it's kind of selfish when we do that. It's like whatever you're doing, that's actually because of me, right? Like if my kid is doing something wrong, it's my fault. If my kid is doing, hasn't learned a lesson, it's because I failed to teach them. I'm basically making everything about my kid about me. And then obviously, as we're saying that, she's like, and I don't believe that. And she was like, and the weird thing is, I don't do that about other things. Like, she struggles with, math sometimes, but I'm not like beating myself up that she's not better at math. And then I kind of was like joking and was like, it's kind of crazy, right? Because math is actually something that we have a hope, a possibility to affect change for our kids around math. Like you might be able to support them in learning more and changing their math skill set. But who they are as a person, that's actually completely out of our control. But that's the thing that we're beating ourselves up for when our kids show like, poor character in a certain moment or something like that. And that turned into this really beautiful conversation. So all of that was the preamble to what I really want to tell you about, which is the conversation that came from this idea of like, you really can't do anything about your kids' personality, like who they are as a person is that's just who they are. And I loved what she said, which she's like, so what does that mean? Like nurture is nothing. Like we all know that nature is in there, but nurture is nothing. And that is what spurned this beautiful conversation between us of what does nurture even mean? Like, what are we supposed to be doing as parents? Because I think most of us believe that nurture is teaching kids to have good manners, teaching kids to be good at time management, teaching kids better behavior, teaching kids to do their chores or say please and thank you, whatever it is. That's what we're supposed to be doing as parents. Parenting is teaching, and teaching in the sense of like doing this stuff so that we get our kids to do what we think they should be doing. So it's like doing what we're supposed to be doing so that we teach our kids to do what they're supposed to be doing. That's what nurture is supposed to mean. But I don't actually agree with that. And the more I do this work, both on myself and with my clients, and the older I get as a mom and the older my children get, the more that I realize like nurture is just love. It's just literally being cool with who our kids are in any given moment, understanding that may or may not be who they are forever. But in this moment, this is who my kid is, and I'm cool with that. That's nurture, in my opinion. All of the things that our kids need to learn, they could learn from us. They also could learn it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times especially now that my kids are older and some of my clients' kids are older, we have this conversation about this kid has never done laundry and he's about to leave the house. And how's he ever going to do laundry? And I'm like, laundry is not a skill that you can only learn from your mother in your teenage years. Like, anybody can learn how to do laundry at any time. You could be 75 years old and do laundry for the very first time, and you can learn that. That's not the point of a parent, actually, because that's a replaceable skill. Like the things that we think are super important as parents are actually things that are completely, a robot could do it instead for our kids. It's the irreplaceable stuff, the stuff that only we can do for our children, that in my opinion is actual parenting. It is actually, that's what nurture means to me. So, anybody can teach my kid how to use a laundry machine, but only I can have a healthy mother child relationship with my kid. And that is 10 times more important for my child's factors of success growing up in the future than me having taught him to do laundry. And so, if we switch that lens and start to think about, okay, well, if nurture means this other thing, it means attunement, it means love, it means accepting and acknowledging and connecting with this human that is in front of me right now. If that's what nurture means, how do I do that? And that led to another great conversation, which was about what do we need to do as parents so that we can give that nurture to our kids. And I think this part, I think I did okay at teaching on the retreat and sort of like getting everybody's juices flowing of like, what I didn't do a great job of was responding to all of the yeah, buts and what about this example scenarios that came up as a result of that. And that's what I'm going to try to do a little bit of a better job of right now. So most of the yeah buts that come up around this is like, so I don't do anything about my children's behavior. Like, what about discipline? Authoritative parenting is supposed to be both, right? It's supposed to be that love and attunement, and it's also supposed to be leadership and boundaries. How do we reconcile those two ideas? That nurture is really just about us being able to have unconditional love for our children, but that authoritative parenting includes that plus boundaries and control and leadership. So I want to say a couple of things about that. The first is how do we actually unlock our ability to have that unconditional nurture, love stuff that we're talking about? And in my opinion, that's entirely about our relationship with ourselves. It's between us and us. When my kiddo behaves rudely around banana bread, let's look at that from the authoritative parenting lens. What is the quote unquote correct way to respond to a child's rudeness around banana bread? Well, first of all, the number one thing you've already heard from me a million times, and we know, is that we need to be emotionally attuned. We need to be calm, making it about us, taking it personally, losing our tempers, making it mean that our kid is going to go out into the world as an adult being, rude and inconsiderate all the time. These are not helpful things to bring to that parenting moment. So, in order to do that, in order to be calm, in order to actually still stay in emotional attunement with my child, even when they're behaving in ways that I don't like or that are unpleasant, I have to do my own work. That's that whole, but it's between me and me. Like if I'm making this mean something about who my kid is going to be as a 20-year-old, that's something that I'm doing internally. If I'm taking it personally and feeling insulted that my child wasn't grateful, that's happening internally. That's me doing that. And that's my work. So that's a big piece of this puzzle. In fact, and this is kind of why I say nurturing is just love. And I'm, in this conversation, emphasizing that over the like discipline and all that stuff is because if you don't have that, it doesn't matter about the discipline. Like you could do everything quote unquote right in terms of responding to your child. Like you could give them a boundary. You could say, oh, you know what? We're not going to have banana bread right now because that was a really rude way to talk to me. But because I'm all stirred up inside, I'm giving that consequence. Like, you know what? That was absolutely unokay. That is not how we talk to people. I spent all day making this banana bread for you, whatever. So the consequence could be the same. You're not having banana bread right now. I'm putting it away and, never mind. But the delivery is absolutely emotionally charged. It has, a pretty toxic energy to it. This is not the nurture that we're trying to create for our kids. So, this is why I always have talked about calming your nervous system before I've talked about, and then, here's the consequence or give a consequence or whatever. It's even more paramount in this specific conversation when we talk about this, through this lens. Which is more important for that child to receive? A neutral mom who doesn't get upset when they, behave rudely and, you know, still understands and connects with and has emotional connection with this child, even if they don't get the consequence about the banana bread? Or would it be worse for the child to get the consequence about the banana bread, but feel completely, you know, misunderstood, shamed, you know, um, punished, all of those kinds of things. So, from my vantage point, not everyone would agree with this perhaps, but from my vantage point, the first scenario is preferable. Now, the ideal scenario is that that child receives that emotional attunement and a response that is solely for their betterment and not for me assuaging my emotions or whatever. But if I had to choose between the two extremes, right? So that's the first thing is like that nurture piece is only possible when we're resolving our stuff with our stuff. Because then that discipline piece is also only possible when we're dealing and resolving that stuff that's going on internally inside of us. Because now clarity starts to emerge. So when a parent asks me, well, what should I have done? I give a hypothetical. Well, maybe you take the banana bread and you put it aside and say, you're welcome to have some after you've, you know, changed the way that you're talking to me right now. That's a great possibility. It certainly isn't the only way to deal with this situation. And for me personally, when a client asks me, well, what should I do? My answer, frankly, is I don't know. And right now, neither do you, because we need to do that inner work. And we just know, and we could connect this to so many different modalities that we've talked about on this podcast: internal family systems, the Enneagram, the anatomy of peace, like anything. We know that as you resolve those inner turmoil elements that are going on inside of you, the right response to your child will become clear to you. It will present itself to you. So maybe for me, that right response would be to say, oh, you know what? That's not actually a kind way to talk to someone who's cooked banana bread for you. So I'm just going to put this over, in the Tupperware, and you let me know if you want to, try again. Maybe that's what my response would be. I only know that after I've done my own inner work to know, okay, I'm okay with me. I don't have inner turmoil about the fact that you're being rude about banana bread. So my vision is clear. I can see clearly that, this is the right answer for me. When my client does her personal work, what becomes clear to her might be something different. It might be sitting down and having a conversation and being like, it looks like you're really upset about this banana bread. Sorry to hear that. Something else on your mind? Who knows? Or it might be that she decides that she's not going to be cooking banana bread in the future, or she might decide that, what, here's your banana bread, but I'm going to take some space for myself because I don't really enjoy being in the same space as someone who speaks to me that way. We have no idea. And none of those decisions, like none of those responses are wrong. And there's not one of them that's more right than the others. Really attuned parenting is about discovering the response that's right for you and your child. And once again, we can only discover that when we've done that inner work, so that I'm not trying to get you to say thank you, because otherwise I've wasted 18 years of my life trying to make something, work that's not working or whatever. So, when we think about all of this stuff, it's not that we don't respond to children's behavior. We do. And we can trust. And for me, this is an easy trust to have because I've seen it play out many, many times, but also I understand the psychology behind it that to me is almost like a scientific proof that this is just how it works. We can trust that if we do that work with ourselves, all of those parenting responses become organic. They naturally arise from us toward our child because we don't have anything internal blocking its surfacing, if that makes sense. And when I want to circle this back around to that original topic that I said, being versus doing in parenting, like, what does this mean in real terms? It means that if we work on that inner stuff, our way of being changes and our way of acting, our doing changes. But the emphasis for us as parents is really not on the parenting skills. It's really not on the actions we take as parents, because those just sort themselves out as we focus on the being, the nurture, the removing whatever gets in the way of us attuning and connecting completely with our children and bringing that sense of like unconditional love and okayness to our parenting. And, as we do that, those parenting responses reveal themselves. I hope I hope that I've done a good job of explaining these concepts. It is so tricky to talk about these things in a conceptual way without being so far into the stratosphere. And that's one of my that's the real connection to my confession for this week's podcast episode. It's how easy it is for me to slip into these sort of like 30,000 foot level philosophical or conceptual ways of explaining things or relating to things and lose touch with. And this is a really true thing about me. It might be important for you to know if you're thinking about working with me, that I can sometimes lose touch with the, rubber hits the road, boots on the ground application of these things, especially when somebody is, really in the heat of the moment and going through it. And for that, I have so much compassion for any frustration that people feel around that stuff. I super duper understand it. And it's something that I work really hard on. And also maybe something that, you may have experienced in different ways throughout your life. Like, I think something I've heard from clients many times is this feeling of like, well, now that I'm working on X, Y, and Z, or I've grown around, such and such, the stuff that used to just get me really hooked and seem really, really important to me, I don't really care anymore, or it's just really not on my mind anymore. It's almost like hard to make yourself go back there. And it's not, this isn't in a condescending, like self-righteous, holier than thou way. It's just your attention, your awareness, your consciousness has moved on to something new and different. And the stuff that you have resolved for yourself just really isn't alive anymore inside of you. And so it does happen to me sometimes, as someone who does this work pretty intensely and consistently for years and years and years, that I have to really remind myself, like, remember what it was like when you had a 2-year-old and a newborn baby and you hadn't done, 15 years of self-growth work and psychedelic medicine therapy and like all the stuff that I've done. Like, this is a very real and alive situation for this person in front of me, even if it seems like a distant memory for me personally. So I think that probably was something that was sort of woven into my energy level during the retreat. And so I just felt like, oh gosh, I want to do over on that, just on that one like 2-hour moment of the retreat. I want to do over. So hopefully this podcast is like a piece of that for anyone listening to the podcast who was on the retreat. And also just an encouragement to anybody who's thinking about coming on the retreat next year, that this is something that is I'm putting front and center in my mind. So this is this I'm an Ania type 1. I always got to be better than I was before. That's just part of the joy for me of living on planet Earth. And so this is one of the things that I'm putting my attention to and getting a lot of excitement and passion already around taking it to the next level for the next retreat. And I promised you 2 stories, so I'm going to end with the second story that maybe brings this home in a even more um maybe heart touching way. So uh my father is an Ania type 5, and fives really care a lot about being useful and having utility in the world, the way that they feel good and safe um and satisfied is by feeling very competent and prepared and equipped to engage with the world. And he spent his life and his career as an engineer, which is like the perfect fit for him. And after that, he became when he retired my mom, and he lived on a boat in the Caribbean, where there's always, if you live on a boat, there's always something that needs fixing. So that was very satisfying for him. But he also really got a lot of joy and pleasure about being sort of helpful to all the other friends that they had who lived on boats. And anytime that they had a problem that needed fixing, he really loved to help. He kind of got a reputation as this guy who could fix anything, had any tool, had all the gear and all the equipment. And it was just very, very satisfying to him. And recently they have moved off of the boat and are starting the next chapter of their lives. And this summer, or really just for like the whole last year or two, I've heard him use the word useless. I don't know how many times, 100 times, in talking about himself. He feels really useless now that he doesn't have that, concrete skill that he used to bring in this place where he could bring it. And he always wants to be fixing something and all of this stuff. And this summer, as I was watching him, it just really struck me. And it's a conversation I started having with him, and I plan to continue to have with him when it feels right for him. But just it really just struck me how what he thinks he brings to the table. Like, he thinks his value is being able to fix something. Like, the reason why I value him having him around is because he could fix a toilet or fix a boat in the lake or something like that. And when I don't want him to do that, either because I have someone else who's going to do it, or we were planning on replacing that thing anyway, or for whatever reason, he feels like I'm telling him he doesn't have any value or he's not useful. And I wish that I could just like hold him in my arms and convey not just to his ears, but to his soul that those things are not why I value him. Like I can pay a stranger to fix my toilet. I can, hire somebody to take care of my boats. These aren't the reasons why my father matters to me. He matters to me because he's my father. The the person that he is, the soul of him, the humanity of him, the himness of him is why he is not useless and he never will cease to be useful. Even if he just sat in a chair and never moved for the rest of his life, he would still matter to me and he would still be useful. And I know that that's probably a message that won't land with him as well as I wish it did. Like I'm giving myself shivers and emotion just saying all those words, and I don't know how impactful they are to him. Um, but I really see a huge application of that to this concept that we're having right now about parenting. Like, if you are a parent listening to this podcast, all of the things that you're doing all of the time are not what really mean something to your child. You are the thing that means something to your child. And being able to be the healthy, healed, wholest, highest version of yourself, like doing this inner work, that stuff that's between you and you, um, is the most beautiful thing you could ever do for your child because it changes how you are. It changes your way of being with them. And that's the only part of parenthood that's irreplaceable. All the other stuff you can outsource. You can be the most beautiful, special, incredible parent to your child, and someone else cleans your house. You can be the most connected, magnificent, impactful force of energy and enlightenment to your child and never cook them a meal, you know. But if you cook meals for your child and clean your house and never do your personal work so that what the version of you that your child gets is stressed, angry, dissatisfied, resentful, all of those things, like that is a problem. It has ripple effects and it impacts them 10 times more than you baking dinner or cleaning your house or being at every single school event or all of those things. So I hope that that's a beautiful, uplifting thing to hear and not a defeating thing to hear. But all the things that maybe bring you stress, all the things that you're worried about, being failures of yours in the future, or all of those things, like if you just let all of that stuff fall to the wayside and realize that our task truly with our children is quite simple. It is just being, not doing, and allow yourself to move your focus into being. What does your system need to be that beautiful energy and life force that allows your child to create beautiful, healthy attachments, form their own healthy sense of self, all of those things? That's all simple, not easy, because it does require us to do our own personal growth work and healing and go inside. And all those things can be scary and challenging and take lots of time and all of that, but simple. And that's my job. That's what I do with my clients all the time. Now, don't get me wrong. We also have conversations about what is the right response to your child being rude about banana bread. We will definitely, work on figuring out, like, well, how do you want to respond to that? And the way that we figure that out is by helping all of the parts of you that sort of hijack your ability to engage from your higher self, giving all those parts, what they need to recede or relax away. And then we can just have a conversation about what to do about banana bread. I hope that's helpful for you. sending you just lots and lots of support and gratitude. And if this is vibing with you and you're like, holy cow, yeah, this is what I want to be doing for my parenting or for anything else, by the way. I don't only work on parenting. That's actually only maybe like 2/3 of my business. Most of my other clients are career clients or relationship coaching clients, business coaching clients, life coaching clients. All of that stuff is available to you. All you'd have to do is click on the link to set up a free discovery call, like you hear me talk about every week. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.